Now, what is the similar about those two industries? Who runs those two industries? Government. Unions and government, right? These, I mean, education is 95% run by the government, and medical care is 50% run by the government. And by the way, just as an aside, Dan and I were talking about this. God, I get so upset about what's going on in Washington, D.C. We have a very effective program in Washington, D.C. for 2,000 low-income, mostly Black and Hispanic kids, a school voucher program that's been around for 5 years. It is highly effective. And I've taught, in fact, just this week, and there's the reason I feel so strong about this, Dan, I went to a meeting, and I met many of these parents. And they feel so passionately. I mean, look, what Americans care about more than anything is their kids, right? And these parents are saying, please let us keep these vouchers so we can send our kids to good schools. Because the Washington, D.C. schools, which, by the way, we spend $14,000 a year in the Washington, D.C. school system, and these places, I mean, you wouldn't want your kids anywhere near these places. And so these parents, some of them are in tears because the Democrats, who care so much about, low-income people, they want to take this program away. 2,000 to 3,000 kids would be turned out of this program. Here's an amazing thing. You know what this program costs? About $3 million, which is like 0.00001% of the Department of Education budget. We are about to double the Department of Education budget, but we can't afford $3 million for this voucher program. And here's the most amazing thing. 2 of the kids go to Sidwell Friends School. You know who goes to Sidwell Friends School? The Obama kids. Now, why is it that Barack Obama, and by the way, many of the members of his cabinet also send their kids to Sidwell Friends. So rich liberals can send their kids to good private schools, but low-income people can't. And why are they doing this? Because the teachers' unions don't want even one single child getting a private education with government money. I mean, it is just disgusting. So keep your eye on that. We haven't lost that battle, by the way. It's going to be coming up in the next week. But in any case, these are areas that are run by government. Medical care is one of my favorite examples because we're going to have a big, big fight on medical care. And I love to tell the story. I can summarize what's wrong with the healthcare system in just one anecdote of something that happened to me personally. About 2 years ago, I was skiing in Aspen, and I took a bad fall, and this young kid on a snowboard just rammed into me. I went flying, and I jammed my shoulder. So when I got home to Virginia, I couldn't put my arm over my head. So I had an MRI. I went to the orthopedic surgeon. He looks at the MRI. Says, "Steve, I got some bad news for you." He says, "You've got a small tear in your rotator cuff." By the way, is anybody a physician? How many doctors in this room? Maybe a couple. So what the doctor told me, he said, it's a slight tear, and you may need surgery. Probably might need surgery to fix this, but you might be able to deal with it through physical therapy. So he said, "What do you want to do?" And I'm thinking about it, and so then I asked him this question. I said, "Well, doctor, if I have this surgery, about how much is it going to cost?" And he looked at me with the strangest look on his face. He said, "Steve, I've been doing these surgeries for 15 years. And you're the first patient who ever asked me how much it's going to cost." That's pretty amazing, isn't it? I mean, a surgery is one of the most expensive things as a consumer you're going to buy. It's like buying a car. It's like going into a new car showroom and just buying a car without asking how much it's going to cost. And the most amazing thing about that experience, then he laughed at me and said, "By the way, Steve, I don't have any idea how much it's going to cost." Now, when you have a situation where neither the doctor nor the patient know what these things cost, we have a totally dysfunctional pricing system. Is it any wonder that the prices of medical care are going through the roof when the people who are buying and providing the service don't know how much the things cost? In my opinion, we have too much health insurance in this country, not too little. We have disassociated ourselves from the patient and the doctor caring about what these things cost, which is why I think things like health savings accounts are so important. All right, I'm running a little bit behind, so let me just move on to a couple other points. This idea that only the rich, you've all heard this, in fact, especially in the last couple months, only the rich got richer in the last 25 years. Yeah, we had a great boom, but it was only rich people who got rich. Well, that just simply isn't true. If you look at what happened over this period, let's just start with wages and salaries. And these are based on inflation-adjusted numbers. Wages and salaries went up by 22% over this period, from 1980 to 2006. Now, that's not great. 22% isn't great, but it ain't nothing. Right? 22% ain't nothing. Then if you look at total compensation, because as many of you know, I'm sure a lot of you in this room are employers, you employ workers. When you employ a worker, you don't just pay them a salary, right? You pay them health care benefits, pension, all of the things that go with hiring a worker. Those costs have gone up 33%. So the total compensation to workers above inflation has gone up 33%. Then if you look at what people are actually spending, what you find is that the average American by 2007 was spending 52% more than they were in 1980, the beginning of this period. In fact, Julian Simon and I wrote a book a few years ago called It's Getting Better All the Time, where we basically said that the average middle-class family today has a higher living standard than the average rich person did in the 1950s. And it's just, there's just no question about that in terms of what they can buy. Now let me show you another way of looking at this. Find this, but let me kind of just tell you the story. If you look at the kinds of things that people buy, the new technologies, and you look at how long does it take for a technology, once it is invented, to the time people can afford to buy it, and you look at old technologies, like let's take something like telephones. From the time the telephone was invented and first put into people's homes, till the time the average American, the average middle-class American could put a phone in their home, that took 70 years. 70 years for the dispersion of that technology. Electricity, it took 51, 52 years for electricity to hit the average home. If you look at radios, 30 years. If you look at color TV sets, 20 years. If you look at internet, 10 years. If you look at cell phones, 6 years. The point is as these new technologies have come aboard, the more modern the technology, the faster the dispersion rate, the faster these technologies hit the middle class. And you know, so my favorite example is, by the way, is when I talk to young kids, because I do, as I said, I talk a lot, I teach, and then I also talk to a lot of young kids in Washington. And I've noticed lately they're so downward, so down on America. And they, you know, they've been inundated since the second grade with what a horrible country America is, and we're responsible for the global ice caps melting and all of this stuff. And so I always say to these kids, okay, you think things are so terrible in America today. I say, how many of you kids have a laptop computer? They all raise their hand. How many of you kids have a cell phone? They all raise their hand. How many of you have access to the internet? They all raise their hand. How many of you have an iPod? I mean, half of them are listening to the iPod while I'm giving my talk. Now, here's the amazing thing. They don't even get what I'm talking about. They're like, duh, of course we have these things. They think that living without the internet, without cell phones, without laptop computers, is like living in a prehistoric age, these young kids. I mean, if you want a good example of how modern these things are, the other night I was watching this movie, Wall Street. Remember that movie with Michael Douglas? And it was made in 1987, yeah. So, what, 20 years ago. There's a famous scene in that movie where Michael Douglas picks up his cell phone. Remember that? It's like a brick with a little, you know, and the thing weighs like 8 pounds and it allows you reception. Anybody want to guess what a cell phone cost in 1987? $4,600 or something. Now they damn near give them away for free, right? And that's the kind of advance that a lot of people don't. And that's because of capitalism, I would argue. Okay, let me just get on to the point. I know, Dan, I'm taking, is it okay? I'm taking a little more time. I went astray a little bit. All right, let's talk a little bit about why Republicans are in such disrepute right now. I think this chart tells the whole story. And I'm a Republican. You know, sometimes I'm embarrassed to say it, but I'm a Republican. Okay, so look what happens with the budget. The blue line is the defense budget, and the red line is the domestic, social budget. Now, if you look at this, it's interesting what happens. Reagan wins the Cold War after the big military buildup, which was one of the best investments we ever made, I think, for this war. And so Clinton comes in, and since we've won the Cold War and the Berlin Wall has come down, we have a peace dividend. And you can see the defense budget comes down pretty dramatically. You cut about $100 billion out of the defense budget. And then you can see here that especially once Newt Gingrich took over Congress, remember in 1994 when we had the Republican Revolution, look at what happens over this period from 1995 through 2000 to the budget. It's flat. There was no growth. Actually, this combination of Clinton in the White House and Newt Gingrich and Dick Armey in the Congress was a great combination. I mean, they kept an eye on each other.